Hi everybody, I'm Kayt Sukel. I'm the author of This Is Your Brain on Sex, and I was having a few moments of technical difficulties there, so I'm sorry we're starting a couple minutes late. But anyway, yeah, please ask your questions. To give you a little bit of background about the book, it was previously called Dirty Minds, How Our Brains Influence Love, Sex, and Relationships. But in paperback they decided to rename it. Basically it's an edgy romp through the romantic brain, and it's telling us all the ways that neuroscience is changing the way that we think about love, sex, romantic relationships, parenting, and really giving us new insights, a whole new lens to look at some age-old questions about love. So yeah, please ask questions. Let's go. So Sharon Berger says, this topic is fascinating. How can you explain the chemistry of love? Well, good question, because actually there's quite a bit of chemistry involved. What scientists are learning is that attraction, it's not so much whether you have pretty eyes or a hot derriere. A lot of it is actually the chemosensory signals that your body happens to be giving out. So all of us have a unique odor print, like our fingerprints, like the irises of our eyes. Every human being has a slightly different odor. And this odor is actually based on our immune system genes. And so if you've ever had that significant other that just smells so good to you, that's kind of chemistry. They have an optimally compatible immune system. And many scientists argue that this is actually the basis of attraction. So later on when we say things like, oh my gosh, you know, that person was so compelling or so interesting, or we shared, you know, a total addiction to The Walking Dead, really you're sort of justifying the fact that you really were into their pit stink. Teresa's reading said, what prompted you to write this book? Well, that's kind of a sad story. There are sort of two things that happen about simultaneously. The first one is that my marriage started to fall apart. That's the sob story. And I really wanted to figure out why. And of course, when you're having relationship troubles, everyone has a book, right? They have all of these ideas of how to help you, and they want to point you towards the self-help aisle. So I tried it. I picked up a couple different books. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus was one of them, and a lot of them said things about science. John Gray actually sells brain chemistry supplements on his website and says that maybe if women don't, you know, sort of go along with his ideas about relationships, it may be that they have too much testosterone in their brain. And I thought, what's too much testosterone in my brain? How do I even, you know, I'm not growing a mustache, nothing's descended. And as I kept looking at these different books that were telling me I shouldn't sleep with men because I would fall in love because of the oxytocin, and my relationship might have trouble because I have too much testosterone, I decided that the place I really needed to look was not sort of in these self-help books, but back in the scientific literature itself. And so I started digging. I said there were sort of two things going on. The second thing was that I had my son, and I fell madly, deeply in love with my son at first glance, and I knew it had to be biological because I'd been a little bit ambivalent about having kids before that. And so once again, it was something that I looked to the scientific literature itself for to find some answers. What had happened to A, make my marriage fall apart, and then B, make me fall so hard for my kid? And that's really what started me on this journey. So Passion for Fiction said, what are your thoughts on people who don't believe in love? Do you have a message for those skeptics? You know, what scientists are learning is that love is a drive, just like sex or thirst or hunger. You know, it's something that we could not believe in. We may not, some may have a point if they say they don't believe in everlasting love. But I think love, we're social beings, we're social animals, and there's something in our neural makeup that gets out there, you know, makes us get out there and try to connect with other people. And so love exists. It may not be in the way that the fairy tales always described it, and certainly the scientists aren't backing up a lot of the fairy tales, but something that's there. So yeah, not an Easter Bunny kind of thing. So Bookworm asked, what did you study in college? undergraduate, I went to Carnegie Mellon University and I studied cognitive psychology, and that's where I sort of got my start and interest in neuroscience. From there, I actually worked as a research assistant in a neuroscience lab at Harvard University. And then I went on and got a master's degree in engineering psychology. So don't have a PhD. What makes me, I think, a good science writer is what made me a terrible, terrible graduate student. I find these little threads when I'm researching a topic and I want to go after them. I want to really sort of understand these little things. Not good for a dissertation, but really good for articles. So Kayt Sukel says, how does the scientific community in general react to studies on matters of the heart? In general, not well. Sort of like the lay public, when there are only so many research dollars around, they think cancer should get it, or, some other disease, and I think it's a little shallow in thinking, because love, sex, these are primary human motivators. They help us really, they also hinder us, but there's something that affects every sort of part of our life, and so understanding them is not a bad thing. But it's interesting because initially when a neuroscientist named Sue Carter turned in a grant application in the 90s to study a chemical called oxytocin, the grant review came back and accused her of studying love, and she got kind of angry. Like, no, I'm looking at these things called prairie voles, I'm looking at parenting behavior, pair bonding. I did not mention humans, I did not mention love. But it was only after she started thinking about it and discussing it with her colleagues, she thought, well, you know what? Maybe there is something here. Maybe there's something that pertains to human behavior, and it's something that we should be looking at it. So pioneers like her, although still the scientific community may not be as supportive of this kind of research plan, has really made it so love is no longer a dirty word in the science community, that people can go out and study these things. So Savvy Bookworm wants to know, can someone love two people at the same time? Yeah. Yep. There's really no reason why to think that it's exclusive. Another interesting thing, people want to believe that humans are monogamous, and it's tricky because actually only 2 to 3% of mammalian species, and that's an estimate of course, are monogamous. But when scientists say that they're monogamous, they mean socially, not sexually. These animals do bond with a partner. They will stay together for as long as they live. Of course, you need to understand some of these rodents only live a year or two. But that doesn't mean that they're not, getting a visit, getting a little something on the side every now and again. So I think basically, when scientists have looked at the brain and they've looked at the way that our love systems are set up, although you can be very attached to someone, that does not, mean that it's always so exclusive. So Liz L. 820 says, do you think that this book would help ground 20-somethings in serious relationships? So I'm going to kind of push back on that, because I don't know that 20-somethings in serious relationships necessarily need to be grounded. I think sometimes believing in magic and wanting the fairy tale can actually sort of help you out. But I think it does sort of help you understand how complicated love is. The fact that biology does not exist in a vacuum, that the environment plays a really important role. And I think that, there's something to be learned from, if you want to learn more about love, from a scientific perspective, definitely. But do you need to be grounded? I'm not sure. So Prairie Dawn asks, how did you end up writing a book about brain chemistry? Well, I set out to write a book about the neuroscience of love, and then all of a sudden I found out that there were all these little chemicals involved: oxytocin, dopamine, vasopressin. So it sort of just was part and parcel of the territory. But I think what I find so fascinating is the study of love, even in humans. This isn't just limited to neuroimaging, looking at some pictures or thinking about love and then seeing what areas of the brain light up. These are studies that link back to animal studies and animal work that look at certain brain areas. There are studies that are being done of these different neurochemicals. There are studies that are being linked up to genetics. So you really have these multiple levels that scientists are putting together like pieces of a puzzle to help us understand this universal phenomenon. So, Hula Monkey says, are monkeys or humans better at giving back in relationships? You know, I've never been in a relationship with a monkey. I mean, a couple of the guys were probably pretty close, but there was a really fascinating study that was done at the University of Wisconsin-Madison that found that cotton-top tamarins who were in really sort of highly affiliative relationships, so they're one of these socially monogamous species, the couples that were really into each other, when the scientists observed them to try to figure out what made it so they were so highly affiliated, they found out it was because, you know, the couples were giving each other what they needed. The females were more likely to engage in sex. The males were more likely to sort of cuddle and groom. And it sounds like a terrible stereotype about what men and women want from relationships. And of course, these are cotton-top tamarins, not humans. But I think there's a lot to be said about, you know, giving back is important in any relationship, whether you're a primate or not. So, Shu115 says, what do you wish that you knew about love sex when you were younger? Oh, gosh, so many things. Don't date that guy. Probably, I think that, you know, the end of love is not the end of the world. We are sort of designed, our biology is designed to love, love, and love again. And so when I was spending weeks and weeks crying into my pillow over a failed relationship, and yes, my grandmother and my grandmother was always fond of saying things like, you know, men are like buses, another one will be along in 5 minutes. You know, you don't believe her at the time. So I kind of wish that I understood this biology behind it, the fact that we are really sort of driven to love, to seek out these kind of connections, and that when it ends, you know, that ability, that capability doesn't go away. It can happen again. Bookworm has asked, what was the most unexpected fact that I learned while researching the book? I don't think that I'm going to say that there's one fact. I'm going to go sort of with a catch-all theme, and this would be my cat coming to say hello. And that's sort of, there are all these ideas about what women want from relationships. There are all these ideas and stereotypes that women are are only interested in monogamy. They want a stable relationship. They're not as interested in sex. They're built to want to really sort of find one person and then work on that relationship. And actually, a lot of the research that's been done has shown that that's not the case. Women and men, they tend to report the same reasons for having sex. Women aren't quite as interested in stable relationships as you might think. They're just as interested in sex and porn. Yeah, so I think that's sort of challenging a lot of these stereotypes we have about what men and women really want from relationships. That was something that really surprised me. So Teresa's reading said, can we identify the things that a particular group of people have in common? Do all the bad boys have a chemical in common that the good guys don't have? Yes and no. So generally when we think of a bad boy, we're thinking of a guy who has a lot of testosterone, right? He is the firefighter type, the soldier. That would be my cat again. He's the kind of guy who's gonna, run into a burning house to save kids. He's gonna ride a motorcycle. He's gonna have that strong, sexy jaw. And so there is this one chemical, yes, testosterone, that kind of underlies some of those particular behavioral traits as well as the facial features. But no chemical works alone. We are complex beings. We are big bags of chemicals. And while testosterone is implicated in these things, it's not the only thing involved. So no, it's not just one thing in any case. Monogamy isn't all vasopressin. Bad boyism isn't all testosterone. Passion for fiction. I'm sure the cat Prairie Dawn will be back here in a second. Here's the tale. How do you think sex has evolved from 5 to 10 years ago? I don't know that that's necessarily a question that the science can answer right now. Although it's kind of funny when I talk to a lot of my girlfriends who are also single and dating in my age range. They're tending to date a lot younger, which I think is kind of interesting. And I don't know if that was the case 5 to 10 years ago. Of course, I wasn't, in my late 30s, 5 to 10 years ago, or single. And another thing I think that may have changed is, what people talk about a lot is the pornification of sex, where, people think it's got to be all hot and porny all the time, or, it's not good. And, of course, anybody who has lots of sex knows that that's not always the case. But again, I'm not sure that that's something that's necessarily been tracked. I'm guessing if you've ever been to Pompeii and seen some of the murals from the brothels, or if you go, look at old photographs or, sort of paintings, people have been pretty porny for a long time, but this is something that comes up in the conversations now. So... Joy Gisela asks, what did I learn about my body prepping for the big O in the fMRI? The short answer is that I don't need as much romance as you might think. Apparently 2 hospital Johnnies and a big wearing machine will do it. But really, I think learning about this science, and just that really, as much as it's a cliche, that the brain really is the biggest sex organ. You can talk yourself in or talk yourself out of sex in your own head so easily. Even when, 10 scientists are watching and you're in an fMRI machine. I think the other interesting thing is that orgasm is linked to so many other phenomena. Consciousness, the way that the body recognizes pleasure versus pain. And I found that really sort of fascinating, and thought the research was that much more important because of it. So I'm actually getting some questions in from email as well. Oh, but I just got one here. VL Grossman. Hi, Kate. What chemical differences happen in the brain when you lust for someone or when you love them? So chemical differences, I'm not sure. I think you're going to get a big boost of dopamine on both. But in neuroimaging studies, Helen Fisher, who's an evolutionary biologist at Rutgers University, found something really interesting. She looked in and she found that when people were sort of thinking about somebody that they were romantically in love with, one area of the brain called the ventral tegmental area lit up. When people were thinking about somebody they were just very attached to, an area called the ventral pallidum lit up. And then when people were really interested, lusty, their hypothalamus lit up. So these are 3 distinct yet overlapping areas in the brain in a region called the basal ganglia. They're involved with reward processing. And if you think about it, both love and lust are pretty rewarding. And in talking to Fisher, it was really interesting because she told me that these 3 areas work really well together, but also can work against each other. And anecdotally, it seems to make sense. Not only make sense, but sort of explain every sort of soap opera kind of situation you might find yourself in, right? So maybe you're totally attached to one partner, but hot for that chick at work. Or maybe you have someone you're attached to them, they've been in the friend zone forever, but then one day something switches and all of a sudden you're noticing how good they look in them jeans. So what we're seeing are these distinct areas that are involved with these very subtle things. And so there is, at least in terms of brain activation, a difference between love and lust. So Liz L. 820 asked, how did you get over the awkwardness of the scientists in the room? Well, honestly, Barry Komisarek and Nan Wise, who are the researchers at Rutgers who do the orgasm research, they're just really cool, laid-back people. So I can't imagine anyone that they couldn't make feel comfortable. They weren't actually in the room. They were in the control room. I was in the fMRI. They're just so cool and easygoing and wanted to make sure that I was comfortable. And so it actually made it fairly easy. But I think another thing that helped was that I practiced. In fact, Nan Wise, she gave me homework. She's like, you need to practice staying still. And so this is one of the studies that I always get made, or one of the stories from my book that I always get made fun of was, I wasn't sure how to practice, right? Because it's not like you're in a cylindrical tube in an fMRI when, you're usually doing these kind of things. So I couldn't tell, is my head moving or not? So I just happened to look over. I had this cat bell that I put on the cat during Christmas time over there. I duct taped it to my forehead. And I knew that if it was jingling, my head was moving too much. And as nuts as this sound, it made me feel more comfortable once I got there because I knew I was going to stay still and not mess up the data. So Bookworm asked the big question, is monogamy practical? And I have to say, I think it's the wrong question to ask. I get a version of this pretty much anytime I talk at a university or at a museum or answer questions. It's either, is monogamy practical or is monogamy natural? And I don't think it's necessarily the right question to ask because we're pretty far away from our hunter-gatherer roots, right? There's not a lot of stuff that we do that's necessarily practical or natural at this point. So I would answer that monogamy is possible. It's indeed possible. And, while there is some debate as scientists of whether humans are a naturally monogamous species or not, there are obviously lots of examples of couples that make it work. What sort of makes us different than rodents and other animals is we have these giant frontal lobes that, are the seat of cognitive and executive control. And, so we can decide if it's worth it to us, if it's, our relationship matters, if we know it's a deal breaker, we can do it. We just need to decide whether it's worth it. So passion for fiction. What is the best advice someone has ever given to you when it comes to relationships? I think my grandma was kind of right about that whole men are like buses, another one will be along in 5 minutes. But she, and there's the cattail again, she and both Dan and Savage have said something to the effect of the best way to get over somebody is to get under somebody else, although my grandma didn't put it that way. She was a little more polite about it. And I think that sort of makes the sense. You can wallow in heartbreak, you can, let it take over, but at the end of the day, I think what sort of the science is showing is that there's no one perfect person. Even if you're 1 in a million, there's still, 5,000 of you out there. So get out there, try again. You may find an even more meaningful connection with somebody. Savvy Bookworm says, when someone is madly in love and would do anything to keep it, what's going on with his or her brain chemistry? Well, as it turns out, they're kind of like a heroin addict. In that risk and reward area of the brain that I was talking about, love actually shares neural substrate with addiction. And what we see in people who are madly in love when they have these changes in focus and these changes in intention, and they can only talk about their beloved and they're only interested in being with that person. They're ignoring their family. They're ignoring their friends. They're messing up at work. What you're seeing is a lot of dopamine being released into those areas. The good news is it looks as though, this only is going to last for a little while. Most studies that have measured neurochemicals or different chemicals in the body show that it's about 2 years and you return back to baseline. So you won't be crazy forever. Hula Monkeys asks, any thoughts about Tiger Woods and sex addiction? Sex addiction is one of those controversial topics. And I don't know if Tiger Woods is a sex addict. That's a matter between him and his physician. But again, given that there's so much overlap between love and addiction, both in terms of behavior, in terms of brain chemistry, in terms of the areas of the brain that are involved. And even researchers who are looking at receptors are finding some of the same receptor types are involved in forming a pair bond as involved with cocaine-seeking behavior. So given these overlaps, I think sex addiction is a definite possibility. And if you talk to some of the researchers who look at addictive behaviors, they think really anything could be addictive. I think one of them was bringing up reality television stars and addiction to fame. Anything that you go out there and it releases all this dopamine, and then you have to go out and work harder and harder to get that same hit, has the power for addiction. But once again, in terms of Tiger, you know, some people just behave badly too. Might not be an addict. So I'm going to leave that one to between him, his physician, and his counselors. So Mary H. is asked, what would you tell a teenage girl about love, sex, and boys? Woo! I have a son. I need to say this for the record. But I think I would tell a teenage girl that love and sex are powerful. They can be overwhelming, and that's why it makes sense to try to really think about, as much as you can, the consequences. They're beautiful, magical things. They're not necessarily going to last forever. And actually, you know, I'm saying all this, and I feel like I sound like my mother saying this to me at 15. I was like, yeah, totally in love with my boyfriend now. We're going to be together forever. So I don't know that your teenage girl would listen to any of this. But I do think that having a thorough understanding of biology, a thorough understanding of sexual function, you know, is really important, can sort of help them understand why these feelings can be so overwhelming. Shelly Mead has asked, what do you think about online dating? I'm for it. Do you think people can build an emotional connection without meeting in person for a while? I think sometimes people do build these emotional connections. I mean, I've seen friends do it, but in fact, a lot of friends, they spend months talking to somebody online. They think that there's something really there, and then boom, they meet in person, and they're like, ooh, yes, not quite what I thought I was working with here. So I think online dating is a great thing for, you know, sort of giving you more opportunities to meet people. I don't think that there's any substitute for getting out and sitting across from someone, even just for a couple of minutes, just so you can get that information, those chemosensory signals. You can figure out whether you can talk to one another, you know, without the benefit of keyboard and screen. So online dating is great because it provides you a way to link up with people that you might not otherwise be able to hook up to, if that's your kind of thing. But I really think that you should keep the emailing and chatting to a minimum and try to meet up as soon as possible. So CSU 115, do you think that the research you did would help a reader with their own monogamy? Well, I suppose some of it would depend on whether they want to be monogamous or not. My book isn't a self-help book, although I do think knowledge, you know, brings your... knowledge brings insights, and that sort of helps you figure out your own situation. So maybe. I know that's not a good answer, but again, it's not a self-help book. I'm not necessarily pushing monogamy as an agenda. Though again, I'm not on the other side saying monogamy is totally impossible. The biology says it's impossible. Don't even try it either. I think, you know, what I sort of delve in is the fact that biology does not exist in a vacuum. You have cultural influences, you have, you know, your environment, you have your values, your beliefs, and again, big frontal lobes that can, you know, help you sort of justify or inhibit behaviors. And I think understanding how sort of the frontal lobe and the basal ganglia work together in this really pretty circuit is sort of helpful. So... Mary Primark said, I recognize your name from reading AARP magazine and review of Brain Games, which I enjoyed. Will I have any follow-up books? This is your brain on X. Maybe. I'm actually really interested right now in risk-taking and what neuroscience is telling us about risks, because I was sort of raised to believe, and I guess the kind of stuff that I do, and I'm into this whole idea of high risk, high reward. But I'm sort of wondering whether or not that's actually the case. And so I'd really like to examine that question from a neurobiological perspective. Are people who are taking the biggest risks actually reaping the biggest rewards? And is our brain really sort of set up that way? Prairie Dawn has asked, do you think there are more asexual people in the world than what we hear about? So really, if there's any point that I can drive home, it would be that normal is not this one little subset of behaviors. Normal, in science terms, is the normal curve, right? The bell curve. And the normal behavior isn't even at the top of the bell curve. You know, if you think of standard deviations, it may be, you know, a whole range of behaviors that fall into this particular part of this bell curve, this normal curve. So I think it's entirely probable that asexual people fall into the realm of normal sexuality. Just as you have heterosexual, homosexual, you have people that are interested in all kinds of different fetishes, or, you know, this is all part and parcel of normal sexual behavior. They're just different points on this particular curve. So I don't know if they're more than what we hear about. I just don't know that they're necessarily atypical. Does that make sense? I think that there's probably, you know, a lot of sexual stuff out there that we haven't even really considered within the realm of normal that really does fit. Oh, Liz L820, what do you think about birth control? Has it changed people's on sex, or has it changed the brain? Interestingly enough, there's actually a new article that just came out that has talked about birth control pills and how women who are on the birth control pill like sort of less masculine faces when they're on the pill. And in fact, in the past few years, a lot of scientists have said, okay, we've done 40 years of safety studies, we've looked at the reproductive biology, but we really need to look more at the behavioral stuff. What might birth control pills be changing? And there have been a number of studies that have found that, you know, women, because birth control pill stops ovulation by basically evening out your hormones levels over the course of the month. So instead of sort of going up and down, so you ovulate, you stay pretty flat. So your men find women who are fertile more attractive than those that are flatlined out. Women who are on birth control in smelly tea studies tend not to pick optimally compatible genetic mates. And then now there's this study that shows that they like less masculine faces. So some have said, okay, well, birth control may actually change the kind of mate that you pick. We may be thwarting evolution in some way, but the problem is none of these studies have looked at, okay, let's look at the quality of relationships of people on birth control versus not. Nope. Nobody's looked at, let's look at the, you know, health of the children, offspring produced by couples that got together when the woman was on birth control. There's really, you know, these are a lot of mights and maybes. And while, yes, it is entirely possible, hormones do have very subtle behavioral effects, and it is possible that it might sort of change who you're attracted to or who you select for a mate, it's not going to change it as much as having a newborn in the house. Trust me on this. So passion for fiction. What are some things do you like to do in your spare time? Do you have any hobbies? Yes, well, you know, there are the 7-year-old hobbies, chauffeuring him around town, building lots of stuff with Lego, learning more about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles than I ever hoped to know. But also, I'm an avid reader. I love to read, and my vice is books. I'm also an avid traveler, and often take my son with me. So the other thing I write about is travel. And so try to get on a plane and get around the world as often as possible. Love to dance. Love punk rock and rock shows. Good food, good wine. And basically anything that has the possibility of making me laugh or making me think. I'm kind of open to new things as well. So, Bookworm just asked, I know you are a travel savvy mom. What was your favorite trip? So yes, I'm a partner on a website called travelsavvymom.com. Favorite trip. My favorite trip is always the next one. It's hard to pick one place, right? I can't make Sophie's choice in that way. But I have to say, I loved Jordan. There was something absolutely magical about exploring Jordan. And I would love to go back. I also, my son and I went to the Galapagos about 6 months before Lonesome George died. And so that's really a standout trip for us as well. Not only because we got to make pilgrimage to see Lonesome George, but also because you have this place that is just amazing. And you go to the playground and there's, a sea lion on the slide, and, you see penguins and sharks and, just all these amazing animals. So it was pretty impressive. So I just got an email question that asks whether I give love advice to my friends. And the answer is no, not really. They wouldn't probably want to hear what I have to say. I think, one of the things that I really took away from the book is that we're all unique in our biology and in our environment. We're all unique in our needs. There is probably someone out there for everybody, and maybe I might not think that someone's right for my friend, but I'm not I can't look into her brain, so I'm not going to know any better. I do often get asked for advice, and if pressed, I will give it. But like I said, it's often not the stuff that they really want to hear. Teresa's reading asked, what are you reading now? What is your all-time favorite book? Oh, gosh. My all-time favorite book, that's a tie between Margaret Atwood's The Blind Assassin, which I think is one of the most heartbreaking love stories of all time. And then I love Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind. I think it's just, Scarlett O'Hara is really modern fiction's first feminist character. Somebody who has multiple layers, not a caricature as a female character. Love that. What am I reading now? Caitlin Moran's How to Be a Woman. And then I need to, somebody just recommended something that I wanted to download, and I can't remember what it is. But some other recent things I loved. I love Diane Keaton's Then Again. I really love good fiction and good memoir. And so if you have any recommendations, that would be the cat again. Sorry. Send them my way. I want to hear them. So VL Grossman, I love the way you handled yourself after your fMRI experiment. Why do you think people were so focused on the masturbation aspect and not the science behind your findings? I don't know. Honestly, I expected a few jokes. Really what I sort of expected were ex-boyfriends to email and be like, so that's what your brain looked like when we were together. I wasn't quite expecting people to start flame wars in the comments section of some of the stuff I'm writing, debating whether I'm hot or not. Apparently the jury's still out. Because I didn't think that was really the point. I'm often asked when I give talks whether or not I think that it has to do with the fact that I'm a woman. I know the guys I know that write about sex aren't really asked the same kind of things that I am. I don't know. I hate to make that kind of, judgment. But I think it's just, as a culture, we don't talk about sex much. We feel uncomfortable talking about it. We're still we make sex a joke or a punchline. We don't really talk about it in a healthy way. We have abstinence-only sex education. If we're not even supposed to be having sex, we're probably not supposed to be masturbating. So much of sexuality is tied up in discussions of sin or monogamy. So I think just people, it makes them uncomfortable. They're not sure how to react, and so the punchline is the way to go. C. Shu 115 has asked, can chocolate substitute for sex? I've tried. No. Chocolate, a lot of other things, it's pleasurable, so it releases dopamine. But I think you'd have to eat an awful lot of chocolate. And, passion for fiction. Have you found differences in romantic brain activity when it comes to straight people and gay people? No, they haven't. In fact, love is love. Samir Zeki, who is a neuroscientist at the University of College London, looked at romantic love and the brain activity involved in men and women, and then also gay and straight couples. He found no differences. So, yeah, love is love. Shelly Me just asked, what do I look for in a partner? Is there something that's a real deal breaker? You know, I always joke that I go for dark-eyed, dark-haired men that'll break my heart. But I just like guys that are smart and funny, and you know, I like hanging out with. Real deal breakers. Probably somebody that doesn't see their kids, or you know. But I think another thing I sort of took away from the book was that I needed to get rid of my list. And that's one way. Somebody had asked about online dating earlier. I think a lot of people discount people because of their list, right? He's got to be at least 5'10" and have dark eyes, and he's got to be an attorney and do this, and this. I think once you sort of drop that list and meet people and understand more about their values, stuff you're not going to get from an online dating profile, obviously, and understand who they are, and you know, just be around them, you know, you understand that there's probably not one deal breaker overall. There may be a deal breaker with somebody themselves, but you might limit yourself too much if you stick to that list. You might miss out on somebody great. Mark Dawson, hi Mark, from SUNY Plattsburgh, and I should put out there that I will be speaking at SUNY Plattsburgh on Wednesday, 6 p.m. at the ACC Ballroom. Sorry for that little plug. But he is asking, believe that sex can be addicting, since the same centers of the brain that are involved in drug addiction are also the same centers activated when you orgasm. Well, they're the same areas of the brain that are involved with love, not just romantic love, but even maternal love. So basically, again, basal ganglia, you're looking at the ventral tegmental area. You are looking at the ventral pallidum. You're looking at, substantia nigra, which release all that great dopamine. So there really is sort of a lot of overlap, and it's not just orgasm. It's love itself. Some scientists postulate, why do we moms think that our kids are the greatest thing since sliced bread, even when their behavior points out to every other adult in the room that is not so? It's because, like addiction, our frontal lobes are dampened down. These reward areas are, hyped up. And, we're kind of addicted to our kids the same way that we're, addicted to a lover. So, or heroin. And it might just be sort of a biological necessity so we don't leave our kids on the side of the road. And so we'll stick by a partner after the kid comes along so we don't leave the kid by the side of the road. So Savvy Bookworm, do you have any tips for keeping the love high going longer in a relationship? When does the honeymoon phase end from your perspective? Gosh, so a lot of the research has shown that 2 years is the magic number. I know there's a lot of talk about the 7-year itch, and Helen Fisher has actually talked about 4 years, which is sort of the amount of time that it takes to birth and sort of get a kid, not independent, but at least not totally dependent. But 2 years, researchers at the University of Pisa have found that when you are passionately in love, sort of in that honeymoon phase, different brain chemicals sort of go up. So you see oxytocin go up, you'll see dopamine go up, you'll see neurotrophins, which is what one of my professors used to call brain fertilizer. It's a neurochemical that helps form synapses go up. Serotonin actually goes down. But then when they went back and measured these things again in people 2 years later, even if they were still in the relationship, they were back at baseline levels. So what people suggest, what scientists are suggesting, is it may take that amount of time to really cement the bond with somebody. And 2 years is that magic number. That's not to say that, it's gone, you can't make it work after 2 years. It's just that, you're only going to be that crazy, distracted person for about that long. There is an endpoint to that, and then you can sort of, ease into more of an attachment phase. Any tips for keeping the love high going longer? I don't know that you want the love high going longer, but I do think that there is an evolutionary fast track to keeping the bond alive, and that's lots of sex and orgasms. It's not the only way, obviously, But by releasing all those great chemicals during sex with your bonded partner, that helps things stay strong. Passion for fiction. What is your favorite romance movie? Saw. Let's see. My favorite romance movie. Gosh, I don't know that I have one. I'm not really a romantic movie kind of girl. But I loved The Station Agent, which isn't really a romance movie, but it's about friendship and how things change and the death of a child, and so I think that one's pretty good. And I guess, okay, romantic movie, English Patient. I think that one's pretty good. That one is pretty sad, made me cry. Shelley Mead, how long after you get married is a good time to have a child? I'm sort of the firm belief that there's no really good time to have a child. You just make it a good time. Not to say you shouldn't have children, but there's never the right time to have a kid. I think you sort of just have to jump. So I think it varies so much based on the couple, based on how many kids you want to have, how old you are, what your priorities are, what your interests are. So I don't really have a good hard and fast answer for that. Hula Monkey is asking, does your knowledge affect your dating experiences? Good question. It probably does. It does affect them in that if guys Google me before they go out with me, they know about the whole orgasm thing. So I can usually tell within 5 minutes of sitting down at the dinner table whether they're going to be a little bit too interested in that. But I think also, what has changed is, I guess, I don't internalize so much stuff anymore. I understand that, love is sort of fleeting and wild and magical and shouldn't be taken for granted. And if you connect with someone, it's worth, trying to carry on with it, even if they don't meet your list per se. I've learned that, love doesn't always go in that whole, love, marriage, children, family kind of way, and that's okay. So it's probably affected me not taking things so personally and understanding, and also really sort of going with my gut when I meet somebody. BL Grossman's asked, do you believe the saying is true, if you don't use it, you lose it? In terms of not having a sex in a relationship, you lose the connection. Not necessarily. Like I said, I think it is the evolutionary fast track to keeping that bond alive. But obviously there are plenty of couples that have lots of sex that still don't go the distance for various reasons. But I think that, sex is, if there's not health or other issues surrounding it, is a very healthy thing, and it's definitely worth doing. And I think it can sort of, be hard to get back up on that horse, as it were, if you do let it go for a long time. Passion for fiction. What do you think about 50 Shades of Grey and the hype around that? What I loved about it was the fact that it was getting people talking about sex. It was getting people talking about their fantasies with their partners. I have a friend who works in, a sex toy shop, and she was saying people were coming in and asking about things and, wanting to know more about different workshops. And I think that's great and that's healthy. What I didn't like about it was that it perpetuated the idea that BDSM is tied into abuse and abandonment, which is not the case. Like I said, if we go with that normal bell curve, there's a lot of stuff that fits into that normal variation of sexual behavior. And so Christian Grey being this poor abused kid, and that's why he's the way he is, that really rubbed me the wrong way. Shelley Mead, does our brain caution us after a breakup to take less risks in future relationships? No. I mean, our frontal lobes may say, oh gosh, or what have you, but again, we're wired to connect. We're wired to sort of get out there. And so I think that we probably sometimes even get riskier depending on the person and sort of depending, what's going on with us. Passion for fiction, my guilty pleasure TV show. Ooh, I love Sons of Anarchy. Love it, love it, love it. Love Jackson Teller. Sorry, I was fantasizing there for a second. But I really like that, and actually Shameless is another favorite. So I'd actually much rather read than watch TV, but there are a few shows that keep me hanging on, and those are two of them. Savvy Bookworm, if you were to write the book over again, is there anything you'd do differently? The problem with writers is that we never actually think that the book is done. I mean, I think that there are definitely chapters that I could have added to, and I think that there are things that I might wanted to have explored, like maybe pedophilia or sexual aggression. But in terms of the way that I wrote it and sort of my methods for meeting these researchers and participating in the studies, I think that was really the right way to do it. And I think it really sort of made the science more compelling and made it more interesting for me to understand just how complicated it is to study these things, but also how worthwhile it is. Mark Dawson is asking, do you believe that so-called aphrodisiacs such as strawberries, hot peppers, and oysters actually play with love-related emotions, or do you think these are just tools people use to justify sexual actions and feelings? Well, so another really interesting thing that's being looked at in neuroscience today is the placebo effect. So believing something really can change things up for whatever reason. So if you really think that strawberries, hot peppers, and oysters are helping to get you hot, they probably are giving you a little extra push. Is there anything biologically that we can look at when we eat strawberries or any of these things that we can see make changes to brain chemistry? No. So if you really think it works, it may just work for you. But again, I don't know how you get that belief in. It's sort of a big chicken and the egg problem, right? You probably are only going to really believe that it works if somebody tells you it works or science tells you it works, and then you end up in this big circle of vicious cycle. So, okay, hopefully. Oh, Shelly Mead, what is something that someone you've dated didn't like about you? I'm sure there are plenty of things. Insufferable know-it-all. Talks during movies. Can't pick reliable babysitters. I don't know. Hopefully the people that dated me liked me a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think none of us are perfect, and we all have flaws, but that doesn't make us any less able or worthy of love, and that's kind of the magic thing, even us annoying movie talkers. And for the record, I don't actually talk that much, but occasionally if something's really ridiculous, I mean, you gotta comment on it. Passion for Fiction has asked, how long did it take you to write This Is Your Brain on Sex? It took me about a year. I sort of threw myself wholeheartedly into it. In a way, because my marriage, I had just gotten, well, I was in the process of my divorce at the time. It was really sort of cathartic, and it was something that I really wanted to throw myself into. So it might be a little faster than some other nonfiction books, but it worked for me. Any other questions? Jay York. Oh, thought about the crash and burn marriages in midlife. Men wanting younger women. Well, you know, I'm not sure. I think that there are so many reasons why marriages crash and burn that midlife seems like an easy excuse. It's really hard to figure it out. Obviously, men wanting younger women, some of that goes back to our biology. You know, what is attractive is somebody that is reproductively viable. And evolutionary biologists have been making these arguments for years. But, you know, as we're seeing with the whole cougar phenomenon, you know, that's also kind of hot for middle-aged women as well. So, I don't know. I think that we like what we like, and you know, it kind of varies. And sometimes things change. What we like changes as we get older. And Margaret Mead, you know, famous anthropologist, she believed that we were serial monogamous. We're not meant to be together forever, and maybe we need something a little bit different in our primary relationship in middle age than we did when we were raising young children, or when we were didn't have children at all. So, Mary H. said, sorry if you've already answered this. What else have you written? I write for magazines like The Atlantic Monthly, Pacific Standard, AARP, American Baby, National Geographic Traveler, really anyone who pays me. You know, and you'll find me writing about science and travel quite a bit. I also contribute to the Dana Foundation's website quite a bit. Liz L. 820 has asked, why did you change the title of the book for your re-release? That was actually my publisher's decision. I guess one of the issues with Dirty Minds is some people thought that it was a self-help book, and they hoped that this would sort of put people on the right track. So we'll see. We only have a few minutes left before we wrap up, and I'll announce the winners who won. This is Your Brain on Sex. But a couple more questions. So, Emma Passera, what do you think about the whole G-spot maybe not existing controversy? I think we need to actually do some science and figure it out. Right now, all the studies that have been done have been on one subject or less. And really, you know, women's genitalia, the clitoris, just the way that we're set up, you know, we have a lot of individual differences, and we need to spend more time looking at that before we can say yay or nay on the whole G-spot thing. Have I heard about the movie Spring Breakers? Do you think the younger members of society become this drug-crazed, sex-crazed, and emotionally stunted? No, because I remember when I was younger, and kids of the 80s were the drug-crazed, sex-crazed, and emotionally stunted. So I don't know that much changes. And if you talk to my great-grandma back when she was still alive, she was talking about the girls of the 20s. Being drug-crazed, well, drink-crazed, sex-crazed, and emotionally stunted. I think this is just the way that older people look at the younger people. So at this point, I'm supposed to announce the official winners. Jay Tutela, Mary H., C. Shu 115, Teresa's reading, Mary Primorik, Crystal Blackburn, Mark Dawson, Sharon Berger, Robin F., and Emma Passaro. So if you are one of those lucky winners, email BookTrib at booktrib.com with your mailing address to claim your prize. And again, thanks so much for showing up. You had a lot of great questions. It was a lot of fun talking to you. Of course, you can find me on Facebook. This is Your Brain on Love. Love, not sex there. Or I'm on Twitter at Kayt Sukel. So thanks so much for playing.